I think most gun people out there now are already aware that the Ninth Circuit Court just declared that individual citizens have no right to carry a handgun concealed in public. Now, this decision was to support California's requirement that you have just cause before they will issue a carry permit. Now, in this ruling, they only addressed concealed carry. They very deliberately pretended like this issue existed in a vacuum and wasn't affected by the fact that California doesn't allow open carry. That was a very dishonest act on their part, and it was even called out by some other judges, but we'll talk about that later. Now, I know a lot of people are worried, like, oh my God, how is this going to affect me right now? Especially if you're in the Ninth Circuit. Well, it's probably not going to affect you at all if you don't live in California. It just means California is going to stay the way it is for right now. But it could affect us in the future, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. But instead of just standing on here and just yelling, shall not be infringed, let's actually look at this in a logical manner, and let's look at it in an intelligent manner, and say for devil's advocate reasons that we agree with them that you don't have the right to conceal carry. Let's just say that, okay, they're right about that. The Constitution doesn't clearly define the right to concealed carry, so let's just give them that, and for two reasons, we'll pretend for a moment like we agree with them. The first reason being, I think even the staunchest Second Amendment supporter can agree that there are some restrictions on how you carry a gun. None of us would say that it's okay to go out with a revolver with the hammer cocked back and your finger on the trigger, just sweeping everybody you see because you want to be ready to go at split-second notice. We would say that's unsafe. You don't have a right to carry that way. So we kind of have to concede that there are some limitations on method of carry. And the second reason would be that they are actually right that historically the founders did not support concealed carry. Back in the days of the founders, there were things called scoundrel laws that said that only a scoundrel would conceal their gun. If you concealed your gun, you were considered a bad guy and therefore you weren't protected under the law. That was very common. You couldn't carry a gun concealed because that was dishonorable. It meant you were a scoundrel. A real man carried their gun where everybody could see it and everyone knew they were armed and therefore knew not to f with them, I guess. But that was the rules usually back in those days, and the founders seemed to be okay with it. They didn't do anything about it, and they definitely didn't address concealed carry. So we have to accept that maybe there's a little bit of justification for their opinion that you don't have the right to concealed carry. But like I say, whether we agree with it or not, for the sake of this video, we're just going to pretend like we agree with them. Well, even if they are right that you don't have a right to conceal carry a gun, California is still wrong in placing restrictions on concealed carry license because they don't allow open carry. Therefore, if you can't get a concealed carry license, you can't carry a gun at all, and they do not have the right to bar you from carrying at all. The Constitution does definitely guarantee your right to keep and bear arms, to have them and to carry them. So even if we accept that they have a right to impose restrictions on concealed carry, they would have no right to restrict open carry in any manner. Which is why, as I said earlier, the court didn't address open carry, because even a couple of the judges that wrote the consenting decision stated that if you don't have open carry and you restrict concealed carry, that's a definite violation of the Second Amendment. But they didn't address that because they didn't want to set themselves up for that big fall. Because they knew if they restricted both, they were definitely on the wrong side of the Constitution. And they were willing to be on the wrong side of the Constitution, they just weren't willing to say it openly. Which, if you ask me, is pretty disgusting, and no person that serves on a federal court should be willing to violate the Constitution of the United States. They should be removed from that court. The way this court tried to defend the anti-gun policies in California by being backhanded and deceitful is pretty shameful, so shame on them. California is still in the wrong by denying people carry permits if they can't open carry. They are violating their Second Amendment right. And you know, sometimes it goes the other way in some states. Some states will not say you don't have the right to conceal carry. They'll say you don't have the right to open carry. And there is some legal precedent for why they can say that. Whether we agree with it or not, they can still say it. There's lots of legal precedent that says that a state can restrict your rights to a degree if it's for public safety. If you exercising your right creates a very unsafe condition for everyone else around you, then they can restrict that right to a degree. So some states will say you can't carry your gun openly or people are going to freak out. Someone will be driving along and see a guy with a gun on a corner and they'll drive off the road panicking and hit a bunch of pedestrians and kill them. Or they'll be in a movie theater at a mall and they'll see your gun and they'll run out screaming, oh my God, we're all going to die, and cause a panic and people will die. So they'll ban open carry on the grounds of public safety. Now, I personally really hate this argument because this argument is basically restricting your ability to exercise your rights based on the lowest common denominator of the most excitable ninny in your area. It would pretty much be akin to saying, you know, a lot of people are made nervous by seeing black teenagers out after dark, so all black teenagers got to be inside when the sun goes down. It'd be pretty much tantamount to saying that, and that's despicable. But they do it. And if a state does not allow open carry, they pretty much have to allow concealed carry. So it goes both ways. You can't deny both. But that does happen. So we live in an environment where they say, well, you don't have a right to conceal carry, but sometimes you can't open carry. So you can't have it both ways. You can't deny both. You have to deny one or the other because the Second Amendment does guarantee you your right to carry. So even if we play devil's advocate, like I said, and agree with their positions, you still have to allow one or the other. And California doesn't allow either. There's no open carry and they're not giving people permits. So this shameful attempt of this court to justify the position of California while denying the Constitution and pretending like they're not, like ignoring the entire issue, like I said before, is pretty shameful. It shows a deliberate bias, a deliberate agenda, and a willingness to break the law to achieve that agenda. Because, a lie by omission is still a lie. And by omitting the fact that they're violating the Constitution in another way, by denying concealed carry, they're still lying, therefore they're still wrong. Now, this is the part where I would say this could normally work out to be a good thing for us, because now the Supreme Court would have to hear it. It would have to go to the Supreme Court, they would have to rule, and in the past they've been very supportive, especially recently, of the individual right to carry a gun. But right now, it cannot go to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is divided. And if they tied on this issue, that would mean the Ninth Circuit Court ruling is law of the land. And that would be a huge cornerstone for every other district in this United States that doesn't like your right to carry a gun to build upon, to build more anti-gun policies. Right now, the other circuit courts are more friendly to carry. So right now, this only affects pretty much the West Coast and the Ninth Circuit. But it could spread if it's allowed to stand, especially if it went to the Supreme Court and became law of the land, it would spread even more. So you might say to yourself, well, we're screwed. What are we going to do? Well, what we got to do right now is become more involved than ever in fighting for our Second Amendment rights. If Hillary Clinton gets elected, who do you think is going to be nominated to the Supreme Court? Well, I can tell you, I think it'll be someone who's gun friendly, and we can't count on the Republicans to defend it. They've never really done a really good job of defending the Second Amendment in the past, and we can't really count on them to do it now because they're probably going to lose their majority in the Senate if Hillary Clinton wins. So right now, every person out there that values their Second Amendment right needs to be harassing their senators, Democrat or Republican, just harassing them, saying, we need a Supreme Court judge that is friendly to the Second Amendment and to the Constitution. Stop bickering about things like, oh, are they pro-choice? Or, oh, are they pro-big business? Or, oh, what do they think about religion? Stop worrying about that crap and worry about things that are actually constitutional rights that are under attack. If the Republicans approved someone that was pro-gun, but let's say they were also pro-choice or anti-big business, well, if they're pro-choice, so what? Pro-choice is already the rule of the land. Nothing's going to change from that. But if they're anti-gun, we could lose our Second Amendment rights. So get on the ball, start working for gun rights, contact your senators once, twice, 100 times between now and the election, and get them working on making a Supreme Court that is friendly to the Constitution. Because if you don't, like I said right now, we are probably on the tipping point of losing our Second Amendment rights. And once we lose our Second Amendment right, every other right is ripe for the taking.